Hello and welcome to Pay Attention, interviews about truth in troubling times. And today I'm with Dafna Tachover, who is an attorney with an MBA and a technology background. And she is the attorney involved with health hazards of 5G at the Children's Health Defense, which is a nonprofit organization that's chaired by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and is dedicated to eliminating the epidemic of chronic sickness in children from environmental toxins, including wireless radiation. Dafna served as a telecommunications and computers officer in the Israeli Defense Forces, where she was the commander of the computer center of the operations center and headquarters. In addition to her work on filing a lawsuit against the FCC in California regarding the hazards of 5G, which is a lawsuit that's going on right now, Dafna has dedicated herself to educating the public about the dangers of wireless technology radiation. She also founded We Are the Evidence, an advocacy group that seeks to protect the rights of many people injured by wireless technology radiation, including children. Since the FCC announcement of 5G in 2016, Dafna has been focusing her efforts on stopping 5G and educating decision makers at the federal, state, and municipal levels. She's been featured and interviewed by Time, CNN, New York Magazine, the Epoch Times, and other media, as well as appearing in an award-winning documentary, Generation Zapped. So I'm really feeling very, very pleased and privileged to be able to interview Dafna on Pay Attention, because I know how much we need to have a deep conversation about the dangers of wireless radiation. And of course, I began my conversation with an interview with Dr. Paul Hérault, who's professor of toxicology and occupational health at McGill University in Montreal. And he has functioned as an expert witness in lawsuits and other cases involving 5G. So before I start actually asking some questions and interacting with our wonderful guest, I want to mention that I've been watching the World Series. And what has been amazing to me, in addition to it being a very good World Series, is that 5G technology, 5G phones and technology are being advertised and marketed in every possible way in the World Series. There are commercials, and there are also various kinds of marketing behind the players. And the kind of marketing that is being done, especially using cartoons and children and all sorts of devices involving cell phones, would lead people to think that this is a very wonderful and innocent new development in technology that everybody should be signing on to. And also the level of marketing around 5G, at least in the World Series, and I think it's happening elsewhere, is there's a kind of anxiety, it seems almost, about it. It's being pushed and pushed and pushed. So I just want to mention that as we move into the conversation, and to say welcome, and also that I think that this is a moment where there is a kind of urgency in the general public and others being informed. And so if you could just comment on the current push, and then we'll go into the specifics about what 5G is.
Hi, Pauline. Thanks for having me. And I agree with everything you said in terms of urgency. And it's very interesting to hear you discuss this from a psychologist perspective and the words you're using. And yeah, there is an anxiety and there is a very strong push. And I think that one point of data that will clarify this, 4G is already pretty fast. And essentially, the way they sell 5G to the public is that this is going to be faster. So it's going to reduce your download speeds from 8 seconds to 4 seconds. So the infrastructure costs about $200 billion a year, reducing your download speeds from 8 seconds to 4 seconds doesn't pay for 200 billion a year infrastructure. So
Mm,
it means that something else should pay for it. And what really pays for it is our data. This technology is not just another level of G. You know, we had 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G. 1G was talk, 2G was talk and text, 3G was talk, text, and some emails and some data. 4G was talk, text, and a lot of data. Our
yes.
phones are already doing almost everything they can do. And all of this 1G to 4G was about connecting people. This is not about connecting people. This is about connecting things. So 5G is really an infrastructure for the Internet of Things, which means that right now we're going to interconnect wirelessly about 50 billion more devices. And those devices are going to communicate. Why do we
Yes.
need that? Essentially, it's data.
Yes.
All of this technology is about data, and that is about $11 trillion a year industry. And this is not data for marketing. This is
Yes.
not about how to market a little bit. They know that you buy this item or that item. No, that's past. That's 4G. That's what you see now when you go on Facebook and whatever it is that you bought on Amazon now appears on your ads. No, this is data for artificial intelligence and for surveillance and for where we're going forward, which is transhumanism. Um,
So let me just stop you
yeah,
there and say, because I want to go into that. I want to go into the whole infrastructure
right.
and also to particularly understanding. I know there's satellites up there. I saw how many on the Internet of Things. If people look them up online, it's IoT, Internet of Things. And this whole framework is a whole different, let's say, architecture for human life than anything we've seen so far. And it's not something that people are voting on. There's no sort of democratic question about do we want this or not. It's being visited upon us. But before we go into that, even, I wonder if you could say a little bit about the just the issue, and we covered some of this, of non-ionizing radiation, because many people say to me when I begin to talk about wireless radiation, they say, well, it's non-ionizing radiation, it's safe. And of course, I know it's not safe, and I have spoken to Dr. Arrow about it. But if you could just remind people again why non-ionizing radiation is not safe, and then we'll talk a little bit about how much more radiation there will be with the introduction of 5G. And actually, I know that already 5G installations exist in some places. The satellites are up there for the rural connections for 5G. That's what Dr. Arrow told me that's the reason for the satellites. So, if you could just say a little bit about the risks of non-ionizing radiation and the health hazards associated, and then we'll go into what 5G is itself, and then the physical installations that are going on, and so on. So a little bit about this kind of radiation, the hazards to people's health, and the hazards to children.
Yeah. So basically, all of this wireless technology, it's based on information that is being transferred in the air on waves that we don't see, which are called electromagnetic waves. And another word for wave is a frequency. And the difference between the frequency of the sun to the frequency of the cell phone to the frequency of radio is how many oscillations per second that frequency has. And the collection of all of these frequencies is the electromagnetic spectrum. And we divide it to two different sections: ionizing frequencies that emit ionizing radiation and non-ionizing frequencies that emit non-ionizing radiation. Ionizing means that when these frequencies, because they're so high, they have enough energy to pull an electron out of the atom and create ionization. That's why we call them ionizing frequencies. And essentially, whenever they interact with our body, they have enough energy to create an immediate structural change, an immediate change in molecules. And that's why it's not difficult to see that it'll be harmful. For example, X-rays. X-rays are ionizing frequency, they emit ionizing radiation, and that's why they're dangerous. Non-ionizing frequencies are the lower part of the spectrum. And when they interact with our body, they do not have enough energy to pull an electron out of the atom, out of the body. And so they do not have the power to create ionization. That's why we call them non-ionizing frequencies. And the whole assumption behind wireless technology is because these frequencies are non-ionizing, and maybe I should do it differently. And so non-ionizing frequencies, we know what they are. Now, therefore, they're not harmful because they cannot create ionization unless they're being transmitted in so much power, in such high power, that they create a thermal change in our body, in our tissue, meaning heating. And so the whole assumption behind wireless technology is, since the power we're using is non-thermal, and it's non-ionizing frequencies, there's no problem. But that assumption was developed by engineer, and it's an assumption. It's nothing that was ever positively proven. And in fact, it was disproven. And not only it's disproven by tens of thousands of studies, and it's not only about radio frequency that we use for wireless, for any part of the non-ionizing spectrum. We actually use it for medical, we use it for medical treatments. For example, we use low frequency whenever someone is having an injury. You go for pulse EMF treatment to help the injury heal faster. Those are pulse frequencies in non-thermal levels that we use because they have biological effect. And anything that has a biological effect can have an adverse effect, just like food. Now, and if we talk about the sun, for example, the sun can burn us. That would be a thermal effect. But the interaction of the rays of the suns in our body create a biological reaction that has nothing to do with heat. For example, start production of vitamin D. So the body interacts with those electromagnetic fields in levels which are, in ways that have nothing to do with thermal, non-thermal. I mean, our heart is electric, our brain is electric, our nervous system is electric. They all work on non-ionizing frequencies in non-thermal levels. So that thermal assumption is an artificial assumption created by engineer, which has no scientific basis, no biological basis, and the opposite is correct. Now, there's a study that was done by the federal government recently. It's a 10-year study. It's called the NTP study, the National Toxicology Program study. It was funded by the FDA. The National Toxicology Program is the premier agency in our government to evaluate toxin, and whatever they decide is considered a golden standard. And they did this study over 10 years. $30 million study, the biggest study of its kind, and it was supposed to give us a final answer whether the cell phone and wireless technology can cause cancer. Results came out November 1st, 2018, clear evidence of cancer. In 2019, they published the final report on the DNA. This radiation breaks the DNA. So it's also creating the ultimate damage that allegedly only ionizing radiation can do, or ionizing frequencies. It's creating the ultimate damage. The only difference will be, while ionizing frequencies will do it in immediate interaction with your body, the non-ionizing frequencies will still create the damage, but they'll go through indirect mechanism. For example, and we even know the mechanism that it's going to happen. It's, for example, one of them is oxidative stress. So there's about 205 studies out of 223 studies show that this radiation is causing oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is a mechanism of harm that can lead to cancer, non-cancer condition, DNA damage, etc., etc. So we have thousands of studies showing directly the effects of non-thermal levels of those frequency we use for wireless technology. We even know the mechanism that caused the adverse effects. and there's no doubt. And we also have the sickness, and it's all around us. And we mentioned the Children's Health Defense, and we work on sickness of children from environmental causes, and wireless technology is a major contributor to this sickness. 54% of children in the United States have a chronic condition. This
Yes,
is
that's true.
absurd.
And so 54% of children in the United States, the chronic condition might be related to wireless technology or is related in some way, or you can't determine that because that would be too specific a statement. Can you say the kinds of things that contribute to children's chronic health problems that are connected to the wireless technology we already have, even before the 5G installations are finished?
Well, they're so numerous. First of all, there's this radiation is causing direct harm, but it's also the indirect factor. So if we're talking about direct causes, so for example, cancer, the top 4 diseases that kill children and young adults now are brain tumor, thyroid cancer, testis cancer, rectal cancer. Everywhere children use cell phones or hold their cell phones.
Yes.
We have now a lot of women. I was just yesterday in some event, and a woman came to me and she said her daughter has breast cancer, and it's in exactly the same place where she used to hold her cell phone in a bra, and the spread of the tumors is exactly the way her cell
Herself.
phone was in the bra. And we see that a lot, and you can talk to a lot of doctors who treat women for breast cancer, and they'll tell you it's women without predisposition for cancer and for breast cancer, and they still have those cancers.
Or even the place that you hold your cell phone. And if children have it, I imagine that it's an even more rapid transformation because they're more easily affected. And so if a child is carrying a cell phone to school, or a child, and now children also are involved in so much wireless technology. It's, in their schools or in place of school with this COVID shutdown. And I imagine that there's more exposure now under these conditions than there has been, up until last March or so. So children actually should not have wireless technology that they carry around and are exposed to. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And a few things I want to say about what you said. First of all, in terms of cell phones, I mean, you would get the cancer in those spots where you hold the cell phone. But what the problem now with the Zoom and all of this, the overwhelming use of wireless is the whole body exposure. And that gives us a whole host of different types of damages to children. And before I move to the neurological effects, in terms of cancer, the reason children have higher risk of cancer is because their cells multiply faster than adults. If the cells multiply faster, they have greater chance of developing mutation that can lead to cancer. So this is one of the reasons why children have a higher risk. In terms of whole body exposure, so this technology, essentially, it's pulsing frequencies, and that interact with our nervous system, and the damages to the nervous system are multiple. The most widespread sickness from wireless technology that we see, it's something called radiation sickness or microwave sickness, or another name, which is, to my opinion, the wrong name, is electrosensitivity. It's when adults and children start to develop various mostly neurological symptom, but not only, as a result of exposure. So tingling in the hands, pain in the head when you use wireless, pressure in the head, cognitive problems, memory problems. Everyone say, oh, I cannot remember words. I cannot remember words. This is what it is. I had a 12-year-old explaining me her memory problem. She said, I know that the information is there, but I feel as if I have a wall that blocking me from access that information. Noise sensitivity and tinnitus. We have now in children, and there are a few studies clearly showing that children that use more cell phones have tinnitus in higher rates than none. But children didn't used to have tinnitus. It used to be adults. But this is actually the first study that was done in the US that showed harm, showed that basically people can hear radiation. It's called the Frey effect or the microwave effect. We have people with heart palpitation, nausea, headaches. Some people even get seizures. And again, for all of these symptoms, there's hundreds of studies that support the fact that this radiation can cause these symptoms. With children, exhaustion also. With children, we also see sleep disturbances in adults as well.
Yeah.
Another thing with children that we see in terms of effects is the dermatology effects. We have children with hands bleeding when they're exposed to Wi-Fi. And there are dozens of studies showing that this radiation affect, the skin, and it's not difficult to understand why. Literally, hands bleeding whenever they're exposed to Wi-Fi. And I deal with these children on a daily basis, and it's not just a few children.
You deal with the lawsuits that are coming against the technology companies, but you're also bringing a lawsuit against the FCC because, it seems as though the FCC in the US is actually promoting more and more of this kind of wireless technology, and there's no concern about the health hazards. And then, of course, on media, there's no exposure to people don't understand. They don't get any information from mass media or any media. So, I would like to just see if you could tell the listeners a little bit about the case that you're bringing against the FCC in California. I know it's very complex work, and you've been on it for quite a while, but just to give an overview and also a little bit of an understanding about how the FCC functions in the US and why ordinary people aren't hearing at all about these health hazards, even though there's massive data that shows that wireless technology is harmful, the radiation from wireless technology, and also that any increase in this radiation would be even more harmful. So could you tell us a little bit about the legal side?
Yeah, there's like 5 questions in what you said. So
I know.
I'll answer on all 5 in 2 sentences, and then I go into it. So first, one problem is we cannot sue for damages. We were blocked for suing for damage. So the reason people don't see more lawsuits of people, for people who are injured is because we cannot. And that's create part of the falsity of people think that there's no problem. There's massive problem. We were blocked by legislation promoted by the wireless industry that passed in 1996 by the Bill Clinton administration.
1996.
It's called the Telecommunication Act of 1996, Section 704. And that section essentially took our power to object installation of cell towers based on environmental consideration. Environmental was interpreted to mean health. So you cannot object the installation of this device, of these antennas, because it may cause you harm. So they can put it in front of their home, which they actually do now with 5G, and you can say nothing. Now, if you got injured from this technology, like me and many others, and you want to sue for the damages, there are a couple of courts decisions that say that if you'll be allowed to sue for the damage that was caused to you, that will cause a conflict with the original intention of Section 704 of the 1996 Telecommunication Act. It's called conflict preemption. And so those courts decided that you can sue for the damages only if you started to use cell phone before 1996.
Oh my
Otherwise, you cannot sue for the damage. So it's not, there's one court decision which is opposite, but so far the court has been upholding the preemption, and that's what we're fighting again, and that's why you don't see more cases in court. But the sickness is widespread. In terms of our case, so the only case we could bring at this point is a case against the FCC, which we've been waiting for 20 years to bring. So in the United States, the FCC, which is the Federal Communication Commission, which is not a health agency, it's a spectrum auctioning agency. Why are they regulating health effects? They're the one who were appointed in 1996 by the government, by Congress, to regulate the health effects of wireless technology. They should not have. And in 1996, basically, they adopted guidelines that say they don't even have proper standards. All they say is that they're based on the thermal assumption we discussed before, that's saying that there are no effects except thermal effects. So unless that cell phone or that Wi-Fi burn you, they don't affect you, which we know is nonsense. And there's no other way to say it. And they adopted Engineer Association recommendation, the IEEE, not doctors, engineers. And all the health agency in our government objected those guidelines when they adopted in 1996, because they said they do not protect the public from long-term exposure to non-thermal levels of this radiation.
Yes.
So those guidelines basically were already obsolete when they were adopted, and they're not biologically based, and they've enabled the uncontrolled proliferation of wireless technology.
Yes.
Now, in 2012, the Government Accountability Office, which is in Congress, published a report says that it made no sense that the FCC did not review its guidelines for 17 years. So the FCC essentially was forced to start what's called an inquiry, and they said, we are considering to review the health effects, and we would like to hear your comment as to whether or not we should review the health effects. They did not even say we are reviewing the health effects. They said, shall we review the health effects? And they opened an inquiry. And whenever a government want to take action, they have to open what's called a docket for the public to comment. So they opened a docket for this inquiry so the public can comment. They kept that docket open for 6 years, which is unusual. And long story short, they were forced to close it. And on December 4th, 2019, they closed that docket, saying, oh, there's no evidence, nothing changed, we're fine, we continue with this baseless assumption. That gave us 60 days to sue the FCC. This is literally the only opportunity we have to sue the FCC, and the Children's Self-Defense took that opportunity, and we submitted a lawsuit against the FCC on February 2nd, 2020. Our case was filed in California, but it was transferred to the DC Circuit. And so the case is right now actually in DC. We just on October 20, basically that case is we're suing under a law which is called the Administrative Procedures Act. And we claim that the FCC decision is capricious, arbitrary, not evidence-based, and abuse of discretion. And we filed our main brief in the case on July 29th, but we filed an amended version on August 14. Then the FCC responded on September 22nd, and the reason I'm so tired is because on October 21st, we file our response to the FCC.
Wow.
And now, and so for everyone who says there's no evidence, the reason I'm still tired is because now we have to file all the documents that they're the appendices in this case, and it's going to probably be somewhere between 10,000 to 15,000 pages long.
Wow.
So if you say there's no evidence, there are thousands of studies that were filed in the docket to the FCC showing clear evidence of harm. We had
and then why was the docket closed then?
So it's a long story, but what happened was there was another case against the FCC. So the FCC is a captured agency. The current head of the FCC is Ajit Pai, who is a Verizon attorney. The new appointee to the commission is a guy named Brandon Carr. He's also an attorney, and he actually worked in a law firm that represent a lot of other telephone companies, including the CTIA, which is the Wireless Industry Lobby Association. And he protected and he actually submitted a lawsuit on behalf of the CTIA against the city of San Francisco when they tried to adopt a right to know ordinance that would tell people to keep their cell phone away from their body. And so he writes on his bio that he had a First Amendment right, constitutional right experience when it comes to telecommunication. And well, his constitutional right experience is protecting industry from basically protecting industry and preventing our right of free speech. So the FCC is a captured agency, and there's a report from 2015 by Harvard University Law School about this. I recommend reading it. It's called Captured Agency: How the FCC is Dominated by Those Industries It's Supposed to Regulate. And now when it comes to 5G, as we said, this is a very, very expensive infrastructure. And
Well, let me just stop you
yeah,
for a second before we actually go to the 5G infrastructure. So I think what you're saying is that the FCC, because it is a captured body, it actually functions only for the technology
correct.
companies. It does not function for American citizens. And so even though this has been going on for a long time, there hasn't been much of an effort on the part of lawmakers or legislators, or maybe there are some people in Congress who had not really, because most everybody is bought off by the telecommunications industry. So even Bernie Sanders here in Vermont and Patrick Leahy here in Vermont, they've been bought off by those same industries. And that's
So
why they're bringing the satellite technology here as well. Yes.
So actually, it's really interesting about Patrick Leahy and Sanders. So when those guidelines were adopted in 1996, there was a legal challenge to those guidelines, and Sanders and Leahy submitted an amicus brief in support of our side on this issue.
Okay.
But it seems that since then, the telecom industry did reach Sanders. Although I did meet with his environmental person in Congress, and I think she got it.
You mean
Um,
Sanders or Leahy?
Sanders,
Sanders. Okay.
but he's been getting money from the telecom industry. We approached him a few times to take action on this issue. He didn't, and so now he's part of. Um, basically, he I think he took. I don't want to say directly. I know from people on our side who spoke to him directly, he basically does not object to this technology anymore, including 5G. And it's not because the science became weaker. In fact,
Okay.
while the FCC published this ridiculous report saying there's no evidence of harm without giving any analysis of the thousands of studies we filed to the docket, um, not only, as I mentioned before, there is a study that was done by our own government, the NTP study, that showed clear evidence this radiation causes cancer and breaks the DNA. Numerous other agencies, even recently, repeated and said that the FCC guidelines do not protect the public. Dr. Linda Birnbaum, who used to be the head of the NIEHS, it's the National Institute of Health and Environmental Sciences. She was the head of the NIEHS from 2009 to 2019. She filed a statement within an amicus brief that was filed in our case. Amicus brief is when people are becoming a friend of the
Friends
court.
of
They
court.
they
Right.
submit a brief because they think that what they have to say the court should hear in order to reach a fair decision in a case. And so they submitted a telecom executive and submitted an amicus brief, and her statement was attached where she said basically that, yeah, this radiation is causing cancer in people.
Hmm.
The previous head of the environmental department in the CDC, Dr. Chris Portet, said clearly the evidence is clear, there's cancer. Dr. Carl Blackman, who used to be the main scientist for the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and his studies clearly show that it's radiation um, causing adverse effects and biological effects. So the government aid, and there are more.
Yeah.
The bottom line is the only one who said there's no problem is the FCC, and one person in the FDA who wrote a ridiculous letter in support of the FCC decision saying that the NTP study does not apply to human. So the NTP followed the same protocol that they use in all of their other 600 studies that do apply to human, but
Right.
suddenly when they do the same protocol and come to wireless technology, they do not apply to human. Well, they do. The WHO classified this radiation as a 2B carcinogen, as a possible carcinogen already in
Hmm.
2011.
Hmm.
At the time, they said that enough epidemiological studies to show that this radiation causes cancer, but they say we do not have enough animal studies. The NTP study provide that animal study, and there is another big study, the Ramazini Institute study, that have the same results. And between the two of them, we have now enough evidence to classify this as a human carcinogen. So
So,
basically,
you know,
that
it strikes me that something that's very different. People often will compare this to the tobacco industry or to the hormonal replacement for women or some of the others, like, you know, the psychiatric medications. There are many kinds of, let's say, recommended either technologies or medicines that have been really harmful to humans. But what seems to me to be different about this is that you don't have legislators or Congress people or even politicians that are organizing on the side of human health and human welfare. And it seems as though the technology companies have a hold on a bigger picture. And that bigger picture is coming in with 5G, and it's been part of the bigger picture for a long time. And so, you know, there's not that kind of interest on the part of this congressperson or that congressperson to really dig into this. And consequently, there's no information. You know, even before the big tobacco study showed you know, the fact that smoking causes cancer, a lot of people were hearing about it and getting concerned about it before the information came out conclusively. But it's more just the opposite. It's as though things are getting worse and no one hears about this at all. And the illnesses with children, but also the problems with brain cancer in adults in terms of the cell phone use, which I think has been well established that it is related to increases in brain cancer. But with all of this, it's as though when you're speaking, even or when I'm speaking to even well-educated people, when I bring up my apprehensions about wireless technology or 5G, people just stop. They won't speak to me. It's as though I'm speaking about some weird conspiracy that they've never heard of, except on maybe some sort of online thing, or someone has made fun of it. And that is what makes this topic really so different, even from, you know, the problems with the tobacco industry or the problems with hormone replacement. There's nobody who seems to be listening at the level of the federal government, you know, except for Robert Kennedy. I mean, he's not in the federal government, but he has a background, you know, very much in government and politics. And so that part of this conversation, to me, makes it a different kind of conversation than any of the analogies with other carcinogenic substances that were being reviewed. I mean, I wonder if you could comment on that, and then we'll go right into the
so
5G
like
part.
5,000 things. First of all, I
Yes.
think that the issue with this radiation is not, I mean, I don't emphasize on cancer at all. Actually, I
Mm,
think that the cancer is the smallest part of this
mm,
issue. And I think that also we all, my ex-husband is an MD, he has a PhD in molecular biology. When I got sick, he was working for Princeton University, and he tried to warn me 6 months before I got sick with this. He said, "Hey, Dafna, maybe you should," he was saying me on a phone all the time. He said, "Hey, Dafna, maybe you should take breaks from calls." And when he said that, I didn't answer. I didn't say a
mm,
word. I was just smiling and kept on talking on my cell phone. And I remember the thought was, oh, worst case scenario, I get a brain tumor when I'm 70 or 80. Everything causes cancer.
oh,
Literally, that was a thought in my head. 6 months later, I got sick. I did not get cancer. I got microwave sickness or radiation sickness, which has been hell, because to be intolerant to wireless technology or wireless radiation in a wireless world, that means you cannot be anywhere, do anything, and you're under constant torturing pain. And so the problem really with this technology is a neurological effect, and we see it in the ADHD of children, which is for many children not really ADHD. I'm working, one of the petitioners in our case, I do want to mention that, including 4 MDs that see the sickness in their clinics, 4 parents of children who have become injured with this radiation with neurological problems, and a mother who lost her son for a brain tumor from cell phone, and Professor David Carpenter, who is probably the biggest public health expert in New York and New York State. He works for the government, but he's probably one of the biggest public health experts in the world. And he, the co-editor of a very famous document called the Bioinitiative Report. It's a report by the 29 leading scientists, including Professor Haru, who are expert in this topic, and they wrote a review of all the science. They reviewed thousands of studies on this issue, and the conclusion is clear evidence. It's causing, even minutes of exposure can cause biological effect that leads to adverse effects. And I do recommend everyone to access it. It's online on purpose, so people access, the public will be able to access and see this is not pseudoscience. This is science made by the best scientists in the world.
We'll put that into the video.
Yeah.
We'll put
And
it
in terms of, so one of the petitioners in our case, which is another word for plaintiff in cases against the government, is a mother of two children, two sons. And the moment she removed the wireless from the house, both her sons have ADHD and autism. And when she removed the wireless from the house, the ADHD diagnosis of her children was removed. This radiation, the pulsing and the modulation of this technology is interfering with brain waves. It's interfering the sleep. It's interfering thinking. It's interfering memory. It's interfering so many functions of our brain. And there are numerous EEGs to show that, MRIs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we see, I think the rates of ADHD more than doubled in the past 10 years. I think it's 2.3. For a lot of these children, it's not ADHD. Turn off those wireless devices. And for many children, that will solve the problem. Autism, again.
So again, just so we don't pass by this too quickly, but I'll come back to it at the end. I want to know what parents can do and what all of us can do. And so maybe we'll just put a marker on that and come back to it, because, I think so many people say, you're working in an environment with Zoom, I'm working with Zoom, what can we do when we're so bound to our computers? And I know there are things to do.
Wired. I'm working on Zoom. I work all the time, and I'm just connecting with a wire. I don't use wireless at all.
Yes.
And I think what you can do is put a link to when the quarantine started, we published, the Children's Health Defense published instructions, a guide to parents how to do remote learning safe, how to hardwire your internet, how to hardwire even your cell phone. You can hardwire and use it without radiation. So we'll send a link, and then you can maybe post it for the parents.
We'll post that in
how
this
to
video
do that
too.
And how to hardwire your house. Back to your point. So the science is there. It's overwhelming. And I think there's a few problems with this issue. Number one is those industries are becoming more and more sophisticated. So basically they all follow the same playbook, and it's not a slogan, it's true. In terms of the wireless industry, they basically are smarter than the previous industries. And that's why already in 1996, they made sure that the FCC will be the one to regulate health effects, and took over the FCC. So their main strategy is to take over a regulatory body that will preserve the thermal assumption, because that is necessity for their survival. And they did it in the US. They did the same thing with the World Health Organization. They literally took over this organization. And I recommend everyone, maybe you can put link to the documents in our of our lawsuit, and people can read there. It's not, all the evidence is there. This is not some fiction.
Conspiracy theory.
Evidence-based. Who are the people? There's even a court decision. We quote two court decisions from Italy. There are 4 cases in Italy. The one that the court ruled that cell phone cause acoustic neuroma, which is a brain tumor in the nerve in the ear. And the court twice said that those international regulatory body on which the FCC, on which the World Health Organization relies, called ICNIRP. And the court said that ICNIRP suffer from conflict of interest that ICNIRP recommendation and recommendation and opinion of ICNIRP members should not be followed and should not be given any weight. But ICNIRP is the organization which most governments around the world are quoting in terms of what's safe or not safe with wireless, which basically they say that there are no effects except thermal effects. And so the court clearly said that their opinion should be disregarded.
And what is the acronym? What does it stand
The
for?
International Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation
Oh,
Protection. That's
okay.
always those organizations put the word protection, right? They protect no one except the wireless industry.
I see.
Now, another element of problem with wireless technology, different than tobacco, is military. We use this technology for military purposes.
Yes. They started with the military too.
Correct.
Yes,
The whole reason we ever started to investigate the harms of this technology is because, in World War II, we started to use radars.
Yeah.
And a lot of our soldier radars, just like cell phone, use microwave frequencies in non-thermal levels. And our soldiers in the Navy, in the Air Force, started to get sick. And they had the same symptom as I have: neurological problem, headache, a cognitive problem, heart palpitation, flu-like symptoms that don't go away. Some had depression, etc. And there is a report from 1971 of the US Navy with 2,300 studies showing effects of microwave frequencies on the body. There is an Air Force report from 1994. All of it is referenced in our lawsuit. A report from the Air Force from 1994 said that studies established that this radiation is causing profound effects. Document from 1981 from NASA, etc., etc., etc. Our government conducted studies that show effect. The main study that were done on this issue were done by the Navy, for example, by scientists by the name of Dr. Alan Fry, who showed that these people can hear this radiation. It also showed in 1975 that this radiation breaks the blood-brain barrier. We have a barrier in our blood vessels going to the brain to prevent toxin from going to the brain. In 1975, he showed that this radiation breaks the blood-brain barrier.
Wow.
There are dozens of studies that confirm this finding. There's a study on 700 people with my condition, with microwave sickness, and 30% of them had biomarkers that show that there is damage to the blood-brain barrier. So if your blood-brain barrier is damaged or leaking, now toxin can go to your brain and a lot of problem can happen. So the evidence is there. There is military knowledge. One of the documents we also link is a document that we got in a Freedom of Information Act request that was in the docket, where they actually explain how they want to use this technology for weapon. And some of you heard recently about the diplomat in Cuba who developed those mystery sickness, all these kind of symptoms. And in fact, the government admitted that they're caused by microwave weapons, and those non-thermal, because they don't suffer from burns, they suffer from cognitive problem, from various other problems which can be caused by non-thermal.
So you mean that the wireless technology would be developed for weapons?
Correct.
And
have been used.
So all of this has been in the plan since 1996. And the
all of this have been before. I mean, we've been using this technology before. Actually, the Russian, there's a very famous story. It's not a story. It's something that happened with the U.S. embassy in Moscow. So when the U.S. kind of like denied that they're non-thermal effects, they thought that the Russians said that they are in order to confuse the Americans. And so what they did is in the 1950s, the Russians started to radiate the U.S. embassy in Moscow. They put an antenna on the other side of the road with the same frequency we now use for cell phones, with the same intensity we use for cell phones. And they started to radiate the embassy. And all of the U.S. embassy in Moscow was in one building. People worked and lived in the same building. And sometimes in the 60s, the American discovered that had been irradiated. Instead of telling their employees, they actually started to monitor and wanted to see what will happen to the employees in the embassy. And they started a project which is called the Pandora Project.
Oh, I've heard about this somehow.
And it was in the papers. And for 10 years, they were doing different blood tests, et cetera, and there were effects, numerous effects, there were brain tumors, miscarriages, neurological problem, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that story got into the media in the 70s. Some of the ambassadors knew about this, but the government kind of like forced them into silence. But the last one decided no more, and they came out and talked about it to the press. So we know about those microwave weapons, and they're working on non-thermal level, which is exactly what they did now to our diplomats in Cuba. And there's really no difference with microwave technology, wireless technology we're using. All it is how we modulate the signal, how we pulse the signal, because this is how our body is affected from this technology, from the pulsation of the signals. And that's why we have cognitive problem. That's why it's interfere with our heart. All of this pulsation adversely affect different organs in the body. And so militaries around the world have been using that knowledge to create weapons with different pulsation and modulation to create different kind of effects. And that's why people also nowadays suffer from the same symptoms, because that's what this technology and this frequency are doing. They're interfering with our body operation. And so if you...
So let me just change channels a little bit.
Sorry.
Because that's okay. No, I feel like I understand more completely now the way that there has been a history leading up to the present time, and it's a pretty long history. You know, it's not even in the 90s, it's before that. And the understanding that this kind of wireless radiation or this type of electromagnetic radiation can be weaponized, and also it can be used for these kinds of technologies. And I know from talking with Dr. Hérault that is not a necessity to use it. We could have the technologies without the radiation. But where I want to go right now is to the
political.
to the 5G. Well, the 5G, first of all, to tell people really what 5G is, that it's not the fifth generation of cell phone technology. It's an infrastructure. And then also, I don't think people understand what the Internet of Things. I mean, people might say, oh, self-driving cars, you know, or, oh, yes, we would like to have self-driving cars, or we would like to have, say, you know, artificial intelligence that helps us with this or that. I don't think they understand how 5G works in an environment, how it works with the satellites, how it works with the installations, and how it's connected also to surveillance. Because, you know, it's, again, talking with Dr. Hérault, he said, you know, all of these things are harvesting data. They're not just helping us. So they're harming us physically and health-wise, but they're also doing this other thing that is harmful and also not acknowledged within the industry, and people don't know about it. So if you could tell us first, what is 5G? When you say it's an infrastructure, what does that mean? How does it relate to the satellites? What about the installations? And then how does this all relate to harvesting data as well?
One more before one comment. So you asked me, I want to comment about the previous question. Two comments. One, read the Harvard report, Captured Agency. Our politician, basically every year, the wireless industry put about $1 billion in lobbying money in DC.
Wow.
That's why our politician, Congress, doesn't care.
Do they reach everybody then? I mean, is there anybody, is there anybody in Congress at all who
Yes and no. There was one person. It was Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut. In 2018, he made a comment. He sits on a Senate committee that oversees the operation of the FCC, and he made a statement in one of the hearings. I mean, I was doing lobbying in DC, and it was a very frustrating effort.
Yeah.
But eventually, Blumenthal did come out saying something, and he basically said that he feels that we flying blind on 5G. Well, we don't really fly blind. We have no doubt that there are effects and adverse effects. There's no question, and we talk about it in a second. But there's a, maybe you can put it on the website. There's a link to a hearing in which he spoke against the 5G and against the FCC and against the FDA for basically not providing proper information. He asked industry representative whether they study the effects of 5G, and they said no, we didn't. He made pretty strong statements. However, since then there is silence on his part, and on the contrary, he actually was one of the sponsors of a bill to fast track 5G, which is called the Streamline Bill. And again, that goes back to the problem with national security. They think that 5G is part of the Cold War with China. And I actually find it really funny, considering how exactly 5G on the ground promotes security when wireless is so easily hacked.
Yeah.
China can so easily hack all of this information if it's wireless. So it's such an absurdity. Furthermore, let's put 5G cell tower in front of every child's home and kill our own children before the Chinese kills them. This is so dumb. Now, the other comment I wanted to make is about the reach of this information to people. The media is literally owned by the telecom industry. It's not only owned by way of advertising money, which it did. AT&T owns Time Warner, which also owns CNN. Verizon owns AOL, Yahoo. Comcast owns NBC. The New York Times is owned by Carlos Slim, who is one of the richest people in the world. He's a Mexican telecommunication entrepreneur. The Atlantic is owned by Steve Jobs' widow, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So people do not get information.
So the wireless, all the technology industries own the media.
Yes.
And so they simply move through the media. Another thing I know from interviewing some people about intelligence agencies and the media is that many of the media are giving the talking points of the intelligence agencies. So the intelligence agencies that work with all of the international issues around defense or control of governments, they're also connected to the media and to the technology companies. So it's like one big operation of control of people's lives without any democracy or any particular government overseeing it.
And now the social media as well. I mean, Facebook is invested in telecom. Google is invested in telecom. My videos are being removed from YouTube, although everything I said is as factual as factual can be. Nobody can show me one thing that I said which is not factual.
Yes.
We actually just, and I'm censored on Facebook. The Children's Health Defense also, we filed a lawsuit against Facebook basically for censoring. And that is going to be another landmark cases that we are leading. So there is a problem.
Together, the intelligence agencies, media, the telecommunications, it's all kind of a big kind of world governance that cancels
Big Brother watching. It's the Big Brother watching 1984. That's like a kid story compared to what's happening now.
Right.
It's really disturbing, and this is really what all of this is about, or at least it's becoming. I don't want to say that there was some kind of a plan, but basically people realized the opportunities here and they capitalize on them. So that brings us to 5G. So what is 5G?
So what is 5G? Yes.
So I think usually the first statement I say to people, 5G, it's also a technology, but it's not only a technology. 5G, it's an infrastructure. It's an infrastructure for Internet of Things mainly, but then to artificial intelligence and anything and everything that will come moving forward. So 5G, what is the Internet of Things? Internet of Things means that we are going to interconnect devices wirelessly, not just people, not just cell phones, but basically anything and everything in our environment. Everything will have an antenna, transmitting antenna, radiating, and all will be interconnecting.
Like
So
the smart refrigerator, the smart
correct. Anything that
chair, the
says
smart
smart
shoe.
is
Yes.
exactly, it's going to be part of that match, which already is. And by the way, and we get to it, my sentence is everything smart is dumb. So that's my slogan. So you
Yes.
do not want to have anything smart.
Smart, right.
But they make it impossible to get. So essentially, if your refrigerator connects to your cell phone, to a tea kettle, to your laundry machine, everything is interconnected. And for me, the most horrible invention out there is diapers that have a transmitter that texts the mother when a baby poops.
Wow.
So this is for me complete insanity.
Because of the baby will then be part of that system. Yes.
There's a reason why children are sick.
Yeah.
And so this is what it means. Now, why do we need to interconnect things? First, there's saturation. People already, almost every person on this planet have at least one phone, and they needed to find another source for revenues. So if you now interconnect all of these devices, now you can get information as to what people do, when, how long, what do they buy, etc. All of this information, they can get the facial expression, they can get anything and everything you do now is monetized. And all of this data, if you have so many transmitting devices, you now have to have more cell towers to transfer that data. That's why we need more cell towers. So right now we have, or that's all data, but essentially before 5G, we had about 300,000 cell towers. With 5G, they plan to add another 800,000 cell towers.
Oh, wow.
Now that is called small cell infrastructure. So the idea is that because you have so many devices, you have to have so many more antennas. And that's why they're putting small cell antennas near our homes, which are cell towers, just allegedly smaller. Well, they're not really smaller. They're much smaller, but they're sitting on poles, on electric poles in our street. Where I live right now, there are areas where every electric pole has a cell tower on it.
Wow.
And they say, oh, there's a small cell. And of course, every word they use, smart, small, they have psychological reasons for them. So those small antennas may be a bit smaller than the big antennas, which are farther away, but radiation drops in the square of the distance. So by the time the radiation comes from that big cell tower, which is farther away to our neighborhood, it's much lower. Those small cell antennas, which are sometimes a few feet away from children's bedrooms, they may be a little bit less powerful, not necessarily, but because they're in zero distance, the levels of radiation we are measuring from these antennas are literally thousands of times higher than what we had before those antennas. And so that is one element
And so,
of
and
it.
many of those towers are in cities already.
Cities, neighborhoods, yes.
Most cities, or many cities. I'm not sure most, but and maybe we can just talk about this for a moment. Increases what Dr. Hérault called a radiation pollution.
Yes,
He said,
electrosmog, yeah.
yes, he said basically there wasn't much space left for much more of the kind of use of this oscillating wave. Was it just a small sort of, I don't even know the language for it, but there was a small space in which to develop the 5G. So it has to be more intense because of that. And so I don't quite know
So
how to.
let me explain. So essentially, there's a few things with wireless noise. So because we have so many devices transmitting, we need more. It's like more, we have like more cars, we need more roads and bigger roads. We have more transmissions from data from all of those devices. So we need bigger bandwidth. In technology, it's called bandwidth, to transfer all this data. And there are a few solutions. One solution is to add a lot of cell towers, right? So if you have more cell towers, you have more capacity to carry that data. Another was also to use frequencies, which are higher frequencies, because higher frequencies have bigger bandwidth and they can carry more data.
Right.
So some of these frequencies are called millimeter wave frequencies. However, people think that 5G is about millimeter frequencies. It's not. Millimeter wave frequencies are only part of the 5G infrastructure. What are millimeter waves? Right now, we use frequencies in the radio frequency, in the micro frequency bandwidth of the electromagnetic spectrum. It goes from 3 kilohertz, 3 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz. That's radio frequency spectrum. The microwave spectrum is a smaller spectrum within the radio frequency spectrum, which goes around, let's say, about 3 gigahertz to 300 gigahertz. Giga means a billion hertz. Now, until now, for wireless technology, we used frequency which were about 1 to 6 gigahertz. Millimeter waves are still a microwave frequency, but they are between around 20 to 90 gigahertz. So the higher frequencies still in the microwave spectrum, just higher, and as I said, they have bigger bandwidth to transfer more information. Some of the companies thought that that would be a really good solution for 5G if you want to carry more information. However, the problem with those higher frequencies is that they are easily obstructed by things in our environment. So that is another reason why we need more antennas. So in city centers, you have to have a lot of antennas to be able to keep communication between all of those small cells antennas if the frequencies are being easily obstructed. However, for example, satellites are using those higher frequencies because there's nothing to obstruct.
I see. And so those satellites, well, let me just ask you this question. If you are in a, like when New York City, when I was going to New York up until a few months ago, I found that when I would look at the wireless technology in the building I was in, there were hundreds and hundreds of Wi-Fi systems in that building. So you have to go through all these different Wi-Fi systems. And then also I would notice there would be interference with various kinds of connections, like phone connections and so on. So I wondered, is there more sort of radiation pollution in a city, say, versus being in I'm here in Vermont and about 6,000 acres.
Yeah, absolutely. You have so much more. But the problem is one of the things they're going to do is for all of this future that they're taking us into is also use satellites. So in addition to all of these antennas and interconnected devices, so we have like 50 billion more connected devices, 800,000 more cell towers. They're also going to put small cell in people's homes. They sell now home system for you, 5G home system. And the idea is that your home system not only will serve you, will also serve the streets. So your home system, and they're actually already doing it with some Wi-Fi routers.
Yeah.
That's how they provide hotspots. So they give you really strong Wi-Fi or booster, which is essentially a cell tower in your house that transmit up to the street, helping them keep that communication going for anyone and for everyone on the street. Now, in addition, the plan is also to launch about 50,000 satellites. Elon Musk SpaceX company already got permission for 12,000 satellites. And they also submitted application for 30,000 more satellites that essentially will radiate the whole Earth with Wi-Fi, and there's nowhere to escape. It will be anywhere and everywhere. However, your device to get signal from the satellites does not directly connect with the satellites. Your device connects to an Earth station, a terminal. So, and that terminal connects to the satellites. So they actually got approval for 1 million on the ground antennas to connect to those 50,000 satellites that will be out there. And in July, they filed a request to extend that to 5 million antennas on the ground. So 800,000 more cell towers in addition to 300,000 cell towers, 5 million on the ground antennas to support that satellite, 50,000 satellites that radiate us from the sky. I mean, guys, this is
I mean, well, it makes it seem as though people cannot escape from it. Like
they already cannot.
Even if you were to go out to the woods with no cell phone, no cell connections, you're still in this infrastructure of wireless radiation. And so you're still picked up because you are yourself electromagnetic. So there's the idea that you could escape is
There's no
really,
escape. I cannot
there's no
find a
escape.
house anywhere, and I feel really bad. And and I'm struggling. I struggled for now 10 years with this, and there's just no way to find a place anymore. And it's desperate, and people are desperate, and people are refugees in our country, and people are desperate to find places. People live in their cars. I used to live in my car. There's nowhere to go, and it's getting
Because
worse and worse by the second.
the car protects
It's not
because,
just I can go with a car to places that may
oh,
be
where there's,
remote, but
I
there's
see,
nowhere anymore. I mean, if you
right.
drive on the road, yesterday I had to drive to and back from San Francisco, and rest areas, you cannot stop anymore in rest areas because all of them have cell towers and Wi-Fi. You cannot stop in gas station. You cannot stop anywhere. You cannot
Mm.
go to the woods. Now they put even in the national parks, there's no escape, and it's becoming worse and worse. I cannot walk anywhere on the street. They have antennas here everywhere on electric pole. You cannot walk on the street.
So what about any of the devices that supposedly protect you? People wear these little necklaces, so supposed to protect you from radiation, or Dr. Rose said his house was protected, and he said
Shielded.
also that Montreal was not going to have 5G. I think. I mean, I don't know if there are some areas where people object to it, or is there
Cannot.
any?
That's another thing. So what they did, I mean, remember we mentioned before the Telecommunication Act of 1996, where we said that we prevented for objecting this technology based on health effects. Because our government is so invested in this technology, for national security, for data, for allegedly Cold War with China, um, and because the FCC is controlled by the telecommunication industry, one of the things that they did was to pass regulation that will essentially prevent us to object 5G installation based on any grounds, not only health grounds.
Mm,
And in 2018, in September 2018, the FCC passed regulation that basically took almost all municipal power to regulate locations of 5G. So people around the country, I've been traveling around the country, awakening communities to the problem, and people start to act, and they cannot do much because they can do some, but not much because FCC took municipal power to regulate the location of these antennas almost based on any grounds. And it's really interesting because the current administration, are proud about the fact that they've been deregulating so
mm,
many of federal government work. But in terms of 5G and wireless,
mm,
they basically took all our rights away on
mm.
any on this issue. And in 2018, few dozens of municipalities filed a lawsuit against the FCC for overreach.
I see.
But they lost in court. And you asked me before why the FCC was forced to close that docket that led to
Yes.
our lawsuit. And the answer is, in that lawsuit, one of the municipalities, Montgomery in Maryland, claimed that the FCC should not be allowed to move forward and fast track 5G before it concludes the inquiry on whether or not we should review the health guidelines.
Mm.
So the FCC knew that there is a chance that the court will accept that argument.
So
And
they
so in
closed the docket.
order to prevent them, they closed the docket, went back to the court. Hey, court, we just closed the docket. No problem there. The court dismissed that argument of Montgomery County.
Wow. Wow.
So basically, the FCC had to very fast close that docket, and they did. And you can see that in the FCC decision to say that we don't need to review the guidelines because there's just nothing there except 8 pages of words without any analysis or anything.
So
So
I wonder if there are any governments that have really objected to 5G because obviously, there are competitive issues. I also know from reading Snowden's book, Permanent Record, which I highly recommend, that the United States owns a lot of the infrastructure for the internet through our telecommunications companies. So we kind of control the world in a certain way in regard to the internet. So I wonder if there is anywhere in the world there's a government that objects to
There are few.
5G?
There are few. Nigeria. Um,
Nigeria.
Nigeria.
Okay.
I think Slovakia. I think, or Slovenia. I'm confused.
Hmm.
There are a few, but it's small countries and a little bit insignificant. I think that, those governments are not going to lead the way. Most government has been pushing it
Yeah.
farther. There was
Yes.
a recent decision by the Council of Ministers of the European Union that came with a very disturbing statement that we basically should stop and prevent objection to 5G.
To prevent objection to it.
So it was a very militant kind of statement, very disturbing statement. It's from a few months ago, and here is, in the US, they kind of like try to present anyone who said anything about 5G as a conspiracy theory.
Right.
The FCC came out with the General Counsel of the FCC came out with an article called 5G Conspiracies Threaten the US Recovery. So now anyone who said anything again 5G threaten our economy. It's the same
Yes.
narrative we used in the McCarthy,
McCarthy.
I cannot say that.
Right.
That's where
McCarthy.
my
The McCarthy era.
yeah,
Yes.
McCarthy era things.
Sure.
That's a
Right.
better way to say it.
Right.
It's the same narrative the Nazis used.
Yes.
That Jews threatened the recovery of the economy from the war, and these are very, very dangerous narratives.
Yes, they are. Yes,
And
they are. And
and
I feel that this again is one reason why people need to be aware. I mean, I have to say that there is a kind of bleakness or almost like a hopelessness when you see the bigger picture of
yes,
what is going on. But at least if you know what's going on, then you have some chance of at least knowing the truth. And there may be more development around people who want to know the truth. I'm going to be interviewing Diana Johnstone, who is an independent journalist in Paris. She was in America and she's 86 years old. She sort of watched this arc of what she calls world governance developing from Europe, into the US and so on. And she sees it connected to transhumanism and telecommunications. Just, it's as though there's a movement. I don't know if it's unified or if it's just something that has been happening and then, people who want to make money on it take advantage of it. But it looks like there's a kind of a movement that is worldwide towards the installations of these kinds of telecommunications, and then those leading to AI, a world of the Internet of Things, and then transhumanism.
transhumans.
And without anyone agreeing that this is what they want, or without any chance of escaping it, having some sort of society or community that is apart from this, it doesn't seem possible. But I wonder if you feel like there's any hope that you can see for any sort of push against this, or any place to go.
It's very tough question. So, I know all of this stuff, right? So I know, and it's very difficult to live in a world when you know.
Yes.
And literally every morning when I wake up, this world stopped making sense to me long, long time ago.
Yes.
And it's a world where truth has become lie,
Yes.
and or maybe it's the other way around. Lie become truth, and truth has become conspiracy theory.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
That's a good way to put it. The lie
it's
has become truth. The lie has become the common discourse,
yeah,
and then anything about the truth is a conspiracy against
theory,
the common
and
discourse.
it's
Yes.
very, very difficult. It's very, very disturbing, and and I don't go into real conspiracy. I don't know if there is a plan. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't go there. All I know are the facts. The facts are
Yes.
this
Yes.
technology is extremely harmful. This technology is now used to develop AI
Yes.
and artificial intelligence, basically, and going to transhumanism.
Yes.
And transhumanism is not science fiction. And again, it's not a conspiracy theory. This is what all of those companies are working on.
Yes.
Google chief scientist is a guy named by the name of Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil wrote a series of books in the 90s that I recommend to read. The most famous one is The Singularity is Near.
The Singularity, yes.
Explains that until now, humanity was developing in a linear way, but now it's developing in exponential way. And so where we're heading is really transhuman. And that is what Google has been working on. That is what Elon Musk been working on. Elon Musk just came out with a company called Neuralink. A month and a half ago, they showed how they put a chip in a pig brain and affected the pig's brain with a cell phone. So this is not a science fiction. This is a reality.
It's where we're going. It's
common,
it's
correct.
Where we're going. Yes.
And in terms of surveillance, so Gates wants to chip us for vaccine.
For vaccines. Yes.
And once you chip us for anything, that's going to be a very fast downhill slope.
Right.
Very, very quickly, that will give the green light to chip us for other things as well.
Yes.
And he works on numerous technology of chipping humans for various other purposes. And he owns he has about almost $1 billion worth of shares in a company called Crown Castle, which is the main company in the US that deploying 5G cell towers. Elon Musk also, Gates also owned paid about $1 billion in a company called Earth Now that's supposed to launch 500 satellites. That their job is to basically film everything that is happening around the Earth and on real-time transfer it. So there's no way to escape. Everything we do at any point is being filmed and transmitted. And guess who will be buying it, right? So this is a clear surveillance technology. So this is what's really going on. I don't talk about who's controlling and why and what their plan. The bottom line, this technology is being used and abused to take us into a future of which I don't want to be a part of. And that's why I do this work. It's about children's health, but it's also about staying human. I don't want to live in a world of transhumanism. I don't want to have surveillance. That's why I do not use a cell phone. There's no way to call from anywhere anymore. There's no payphone. So whenever I travel, I buy a card to have my phone on. But otherwise, the phone is in a non-tracking device. I keep it in something like that, which cannot be tracked. I'm not willing to be part of the system. And this is very disturbing to me. I don't want people to know anything and everything about it. And it's not because I have something to hide. It's
of course not.
My privacy. Because I don't want to go anywhere and immediately every stupid clerk out there can see immediately anything and everything they want about me. No, I don't. I don't want to, because then this is all going to be used and abused and already is. So,
I think a lot of people don't understand that the data that are stored from all of this can be accessed very quickly through data mining. And it doesn't matter how you encrypt or how you delete or whatever you do it's all there. It's all there permanently. It's a permanent record, and it can be mined at any moment. And at any moment, particularly after 5G comes in, it's not even that somebody would need to be interested in you particularly.
It would just be hacked.
It would be hacked or mined. That's right. That's right.
And by the way, hold on. Gates actually building a city now in Arizona. He bought land and he's building a city that basically will be data centers. That's what all over the world we are now building data center, because all of this information, it takes a lot of data center to maintain and analyze. And so all of this information is going to be used and abused and have been used and abused.
Yes.
And I don't know if you saw, there's there are videos of what's going on in China. And, we're just a few steps behind China, guys.
I know.
Horrible society. They put devices on children's brains to monitor nonstop how the brains operate, so the teacher can see if a child is concentrated or not. I mean, next stage, to just give them electric shocks this is a world that I don't want to be a part of, and that's why I wake up every morning and do what I can to stop it.
That does honestly sound like the Nazis. I mean, so much of this sounds like what you could call like a final solution to controlling everybody. and to making
It's
the world
fear.
one particular picture of how it should be. And what is so troubling is that, really educated people who actually are paying attention to other things do not pay attention to this. And it's and maybe one reason why they don't is that when you do begin to pay attention, there isn't an easy solution to that. I mean, it's not as though you could escape to some cave in India and you would be able to be alone. It's basically a network. I mean, again, 5G is an infrastructure and a network of communication among and between all sorts of data points. And whether or not you want to be in it or not, it's going to be there. And it seems like it will take so much, uh, let's say, protest, or I'm not even sure what. I mean, I see Robert Kennedy as a kind of a hero. I see Julian Assange as a hero. I see, Snowden, who's now become a Russian citizen, I guess, also as a hero. These are people who are trying to bring out some truth about the bigger picture, but they get drowned easily in the larger media.
Um, it's tough. I mean, we're really fighting uh, mighty forces.
Yes,
It's
yes,
it's just, I mean, we are blocked in the media, so we
yes.
go to social media. Now we are blocked in
On
social
social
media.
media, right?
We are, called conspiracy theorists. We are, it just it's just overwhelming. It really is, and there's cognitive dissonance with the people for various reasons. I think the main reason is I think it's overwhelming to people. I think people's
Yes,
life is overwhelming anyway.
yes,
If you're a parent, and let's say you're a parent and you read all of the stuff and you believe it,
yes,
and even just the part about the harms of wireless, the
yes,
amount of decisions that you have to make now
yes,
is overwhelming. If
yes,
you know that this is worse to your child than cigarettes, this is worse than your child than anything else you give, which it is,
yes,
you should not allow your child to use a cell phone.
right,
How do you take your child's cell phone?
right. Because then it puts your child outside of its social group. I mean, it's
And your
it's
child will
it's
get it by himself.
yes,
And
that's
and
right,
it's
right,
just
right.
there's just no end to this. And
Yes,
so people cannot deal with it. This is too much for people. And now with the COVID, and so people just cannot handle it. And they just try and block what they see, try and block what they hear. And that is how also this evil perpetuates.
that's right. That's
And
right. That's right. And you said to me one reason why you work on it is that you have had family that were in the Holocaust, and that you do know that what's happening now is going to happen to everybody. And if some people don't wake up and see what it means, then nobody can wake up. I mean, there has to be some sort of waking up. There has to be some sort of pushing back. And even, it's just that it's very difficult to see any light at the end of the road, of where this is going to go, except the one thing that I could say that I have felt a bit better about is that there are many people like you. uh, Diana Johnston is another, other people that are working through Consortium News, little small groups of people trying to bring out a bigger conversation. And yes, probably censored on the internet, right and left. I've heard, I'll look at something and the next day it's gone. But if we don't work for the truth, then we are working for lies. So
and
it's,
I cannot be praying. Yeah, and this is
yeah,
really for me what it is. I just many times, I don't have the solution. I don't know what need to happen to create change. All I know that all of us need to wake up every morning and do the best we can.
yeah,
We don't know how change will happen. Maybe there'll be one leader who will wake up because he'll see his child so sick that he'll decide to take very adamant action. I don't know. I know that we have to do all we can to spread the truth and speak the truth. And I truly feel compelled to do it. I cannot see what I see and know what I know and not speak the truth. And, many times it feels so hopeless, and I try to think about the Holocaust. I thought, people saw this evil, saw Hitler, they see their family gassed, they say things that are unimaginable. And how did they survive? You just keep on going, and they had those people who were coming back from the camps, from the death camps, and they were trying to warn people, and the people didn't want to hear, and they actually said that they're crazy. And this is really the kind of reactions we're getting now in many ways. But the truth is the truth, and as Gandhi said, and you have to speak it, even if you're the only one. And we need to speak the truth. And I think that my hope is really in the fact that this is physiologically not sustainable.
Yes.
And
so you think enough people will begin to notice in their own experience, and that there might be some more powerful people who notice that. And I mean, I even wonder, though, if there are ways that more powerful people can block their homes or their families. You can't really block it.
I think, first of all, I mean, a lot of people and powerful people, families are sick. They just don't want to make the connection.
I see.
And I believe, and it's not just a belief, about 30% of people already have symptoms.
Yeah.
Between all this ADHD, all this autism, all the
children,
cancers, all this stuff, it's there. You just don't want to make the connection. I was talking to a woman yesterday who tells me that, she just had an appointment to a neurologist because she have tingling and pain all over her hand, the same hand she uses a cell phone. People wear their eye watches. The way the eye watch measure your heart is by sending 300 to 400 pulses a second. Those pulses messes up your heart. So you measure your heart by messing up your heart. And I wish I was exaggerating. 50% of people I speak with who have this eye watches, have heart palpitations.
Wow. Wow.
And they kind of like make the connection, and they feel pain in the hand when they wear the eye watch, but they keep on wearing it. There's such a disconnect. But the bottom line is we need to continue to speak up, because people are making the connections, because people are starting to shield their homes. People try to go back to hardwired internet. And however, shielding your home, you can shield, but only to some extent. If you have a 5G small cell in front of your home, which so many people now have and don't even know, you can shield your house, but it'll take quite a lot of work and money to reduce radiation, but it's not going to eliminate it, because it's such close proximity. Those materials that help you shield the house attenuate the radiation. They don't block radiation. So they can attenuate it only so far. And then you go out on the street and immediately you're bombarded.
Yes.
And just to give a point of reference, the levels of radio frequency radiation we now have in our environment are quintillion times higher. Quintillion is 1 and 18 zeros after this. Quintillion times higher than the natural RF levels in the environment. And they're very minuscule, and they have very few frequencies, and come from the sun. In the past 30 years, we increased those levels in brillion and trillion times. So when you hear, these are low intensity, non-thermal levels of radio frequency radiation, those low intensities are million, billion, trillion, quintillion times higher than what your body evolved to tolerate. Furthermore, these signals are modulated in pulse, which makes them vibrate, which makes them more bioactive. And this is really where most of the harm is. So we need to wake up.
Yes.
This affects our brain, and in so many ways. And we need to wake up to keep ourselves as humans and as functioning humans.
Yes, and I mean, I know that again, in this time, at this moment, with people locked down and having to be on their computers much more, and people afraid of the virus, even though the virus is not nearly as harmful as all of these other things, they're staying at home and they're on computers more, on Zoom more, on their technology more. It's like in these conditions, it's very difficult, I think, for all of us to recognize what transhumanism is, that we're moving into something where we won't have the freedom to just walk around and be ourselves. We won't have the capacity to get away from the radiation. I mean, because it will be around us. And unless we do something to stop it, unless we recognize also the risks, particularly to children and babies, if we could just recognize that and create some safety, then there might be a chance that children growing up now won't be so harmed. I mean, I see the changes in autism. I see the changes in ADD and ADHD. Everybody sees it. It's visible. It's not just, as Robert Kennedy says in one of his interviews, this isn't what used to be called autism. What you see now is actually a very disabled person who has come out of an environment where the parents have tried to do everything they could. And this includes the multiple vaccinations as well as the wireless radiation. I mean, I think that they're working together.
They work in synergy. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
right.
As I said,
To create a failure for a lot of children. And it's hard to imagine that good people who are trying to actually live their lives well wouldn't want to know that, wouldn't want to be aware of that and to stop that. But I think under the circumstances that we're in right now, there's so much fear, there's so much social compliance to staying at home. And it's hard for people to take on one more thing. Oh, 5G. Oh, this is something we should pay attention to.
Yeah.
And yet, to me, this is the biggest thing that's coming. The biggest thing that's coming is transhumanism and 5G. And without really creating some awareness of that, I feel like I would fail, even as a psychologist. That now that I understand this and I know it, I need to talk about it. I need to make it clear to people. And then as a Buddhist, because I've been a lifelong Buddhist practitioner, the Buddha always said, you've got to reveal the truth. Even if the truth is difficult, you don't hide from it. By revealing it, then you understand more. And so, it's really because of my own desire to just do what I'm spiritually dedicated to doing, and then also psychologically working with people. I see the harm of all of this, but I don't. I feel like I have to do it. I see you doing it. I see some others doing it, but I don't feel a lot of hope yet. I mean, maybe there'll be some hope.
I don't know. I honestly don't see hope too, but I think in order to continue to do that, I guess I do have some hope.
Yes,
Otherwise, I
yes,
will
yes,
not, right?
some hope. Yes,
So
yes.
it's very difficult to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And even the little hope I have is based on something which you said, because, I believe that this is not sustainable physiologically. And so it's going to explode. And that's a negative hope, right? But as you said, we know the truth and we have to speak it out. And hopefully change will happen. And it has been happening. I mean, more and more people are becoming awake. More people are learning. And
Are more people are more people joining the Children's Health Defense Fund? I mean, because I discovered it maybe now about a year ago, or maybe not even, through my son and my grandson around the issues of vaccination, and then I started following it, and then I joined it, and then I saw, oh my, there's a lot that's happening through this organization. It's not just about vaccinations. And so I assume maybe more people are joining that.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely see more and more members, more and more people are becoming awakened. And I joined the Children's Health Defense about a year ago, and I'm just in awe of the people who are working for this organization and the work they're doing. And we truly we really, I think we right now the leading organization in the world in exposing the truth on what's happening in the world. We have the case on the 5G. We have a case against social media censorship against Facebook. We have numerous cases on vaccines, and we'll keep on being proactive until this lie is being exposed. We need to stop this to just keep humanity surviving. And
There was a
this is
huge protest in Europe when Kennedy was there, and in Germany particularly. And I don't know if those kinds of protests do make a difference. You know, and I know in France also there have been some movements among people. I think you told me about it in the one of the
in Orange, in the telecom company. The
Orange, yes.
1,000 employees wrote a letter to the company that they don't want us to continue with 5G.
Yeah.
It is growing, and this is, you know, this technology is bad on so many levels, even environmental. We didn't talk about environmental issues. You know, those Orange employees, Orange is one of the 10 biggest cell phone and wireless companies in the world. And their employees wrote a letter against 5G, and their main call was on the issue of environmental problems.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
just give us a brief understanding of
so
how
that's what I'm saying. So this, first of all, we need to understand that this technology affects not only people, it's also affect animals, clearly.
Yes.
Most of the studies we're doing are in animals. And furthermore, we see what happens to animal now in environment, the problem with the migration of birds. There's a Department of Interior, the US Department of Interior wrote a letter to the FCC about those problems. They wrote that the FCC guidelines are 30 years obsolete. And that's the problem. That's the cell towers are causing the problems with the bird migrations and other problems. Numerous studies showing that this may explain the problem with the migration, the problem with you know, various species disappearing.
With the bee, I heard the bees.
The bee colony. I'm a beekeeper, and the reason I started being a beekeeper is when I learned about the effects of this technology on bees. That it's probably the most important explanation to the bee colony collapse. And the studies and the evidence are just overwhelming. We just keep on looking the other way. Bees, birds, even the studies on tigers and on frogs and on there's ample evidence. There's evidence on effects on plants. There are about 90% of the studies that were done on effects on plants showing effects. And you can see that certain plants are more affected than other plants, like humans. Some people will be more affected than other humans. And then there's the issue of energy consumption. And just there is estimation, clearly we cannot, you know, this is just starting the 5G. The estimation is that the 5G technology is going to increase energy consumption by 170%.
Wow.
In that letter that was written by the Orange employees, they said that the energy consumption of 5G will be 3 times higher than that of 4G. And there's a lot of evidence to support it. On the other hand, we keep on promoting this technology as this is going to smart technology.
Yes, that's what I thought.
It's basically they use it as a solution to combat climate change, and it's actually the opposite. All the benefit that can come from all of these smart technologies are not going to offset the increase on energy consumption that they are creating and the carbon footprint. In fact, for example, the increase of use of the wireless cloud between 2012 to 2015 was equivalent of adding 4.9 million cars to the road.
Wow.
The wireless cloud of personal use. So this is not sustainable. 5G, when it comes to the millimeter waves, they require so much power in order to push that signal far away that Verizon wanted to launch their Verizon Home system, which is based on millimeter waves. And they couldn't find a company that will be able to create a strong enough power supply for their antennas.
Wow.
The cell phones, the 5G cell phones, because of those, because of the way they communicate with the cell towers, they are draining the battery of the phone. So you need to charge your phone more. There's like so many elements of this. And
so really it's no offset for anything that's saved from the carbon fuels. And so the idea, again, there's one of those lies that's being put forth as a truth. I saw it actually in the World Series last night. They were talking about the cars, the electric cars, the self-driving cars
it's
that are
funny.
coming with 5G that will save the planet from, on the carbon fuel side of things. So again, it's being presented as the solution to the problems that were created by carbon fuels, when actually it's going to use the energy, and that same energy that you cannot substitute with solar panels or with wind energy for the kind of use of electricity and all of the different kinds of energies that will be needed for this. You can't there. So it's just the opposite again.
Not just that, the bad news is that this is also a whole different level of it. I have to say, people, do not use solar panels in your homes. This is, again, it's issue of electromagnetic field and radiation.
Wow.
It actually messes people up. People are getting very sick from those solar panels when they're on their homes, and they use inverters that create problem with the electric system in the house, something called dirty electricity that is very, very bioactive.
So
And
it's still another radiation problem.
It's another problem, yeah, and it's a
Wow.
major problem.
Wow.
Major
Wow.
problem. Those wind turbines also causing microwave sickness type of kind of reactions. The vibration, they cause such intense vibrations in the air.
Yeah.
That are affecting people's body. And our nervous system is very sensitive to vibrational effects. And there are a lot of reports of people getting sick around wind turbines. So everything we do, we need to do smarter, and we're doing it dumber.
Yeah.
And we have companies.
But then we're calling that smarter.
Exactly, and that is the manipulation these companies use. Again, humans are using everything that can be positive, they make it into negative. So they use what they learn, very psychological study, how to manipulate us. And there's a movie that I recommend people to see, The Social Dilemma. Yes. Although they deny any problem with radiation, it's okay. Yes. They still make a very strong point as to what's going on in terms of how those interests manipulate us to their own benefits. And so unfortunately, we really cannot believe anything coming out of companies. Unfortunately, even journalists without bad intentions, they don't do their research. In this media that is so intense that you have to, every few minutes, you have to change your headlines and create more and more articles. Nobody really learns the evidence. So you have mediocre journalists in a mediocre media putting articles which are not fact-checked, so just slogans. People need to do their own research, but that's also very difficult. So it's a
well. So I mean, you've done so much research, and so we're coming to the end of our conversation. But I think in this 2-hour interview, we've introduced a lot of truth and also some very good studies that people can look at to get acquainted, and then some things they can do as parents and do in their homes. None of those things, though, can overcome the bigger issues that are coming in terms of 5G, world governance, and transhumanism. That's where I think you have to see the bigger picture, that we need to work as individuals. We can't any longer assume that our governments, our politicians, that there's somebody out there that's just working for us.
Nobody.
It's like we really have to work for ourselves now, and to get informed in a different way. And I agree with you that I didn't realize how much energy was being consumed by these devices, but there's got to be a point at which people actually recognize, because there's got to be some sort of stopping point where too many people are sick, or too many other species have been harmed, or we notice that this thing
it's there. We just continue to ignore it. The bees, there are no bees. 50
but because the
types of insects are about to disappear.
But
Um,
there's always a different explanation for it. It's not the explanation, like you say, that there's not been an explanation that has worked against wireless technology. It's as though wireless technology is always the savior.
it's a solution, right?
It's the solution. Yes.
I think the problem is, and this is, I think that's where I went to. I think people need to understand that it's time for tough decisions.
Yes,
I think
exactly.
people want to find solution in consuming more.
Yeah.
They want to have something that they can put on their cell phone that will stop the radiation. Nothing that you put on your cell phone will stop the radiation. If that cell phone communicates with the cell towers, which is miles away, that cell phone will continue to emit radiation. And that radiation is going to harm you. And so people want to consume to solve the problem with consuming more and more.
Yes, yes.
There's no solution by except consuming less. People need
Yes.
to consume less, and people need to have discipline, and people need to understand that it's time to make tough decisions, and it's time to be parents and protect your children and protect your family, even if it's tough. So it's tough. It's time for people to make tough decisions, to get educated and educate others. And this is what it will take. It really, this fight will take the grassroots. The only way we can win this fight is through the grassroots.
Yes, yes. And so I want to thank you for doing the work that you do.
Thank you.
And I do
Thank
hope
you.
that I hope we get to talk again in a more hopeful moment, maybe where
Amen.
some things are changing and something has moved on. And in the meantime, please thank Robert Kennedy and all of the people that work for the Children's Health Defense, because like you said, I do believe they might be the most important organization as an organization that is fighting for the truth right now. So please thank everyone, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Polly, and thank you for what you do to educate and